Hello and welcome. Enjoy the content. And don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications. Caroline gazed at John with a mysterious smile as the soft glow of candlelight danced across the dinner table. The gentle music playing in the background set an ideal tone for a romantic evening between two people deeply in love. Even after a decade of marriage, their eyes still sparkled with affection. Yet, beneath the outward tranquility, there lingered an unspoken tension, an expectation unvoiced. John, there's something I've been thinking about lately, Caroline began, her voice calm but deliberate, as if she wanted to weigh every word carefully. John looked up, intrigued. He knew his wife well enough to recognize that such a tone signaled something significant. Perhaps she was considering a trip, a career move, or even the long overdue home renovation. But what she said next caught him completely off guard. I want to try something different, something to break us out of our routine. You know how much I love you and cherish our relationship, but I feel like we've become stagnant. She paused, observing John's expression as he remained focused on her, clearly curious. I was thinking about visiting a swinger club. John froze for a moment, his mind racing to process her words. A flood of emotions and thoughts swept over him. He never would have expected Caroline, with her calm and reserved nature, to suggest something so daring. What had prompted her to propose such a bold idea? He was at a loss for words, and an uneasy silence settled between them. Sensing his confusion, Caroline gently reached for his hand. I'm not saying we need to act on this right away. I just wanted to be honest about how I've been feeling, she said hesitantly, searching for the right phrasing. This isn't about fixing something that's broken, but about discovering new dimensions of ourselves together. John's initial discomfort gradually shifted to cautious intrigue. He knew their marriage was strong, built on genuine love and trust. Still, he couldn't deny the creeping monotony they had been experiencing. Caroline's suggestion was undeniably bold, but he didn't want to reject the idea outright without deeper thought. Why haven't you brought this up before? He asked, still visibly taken aback. Caroline offered a shy yet brave smile. I wasn't sure how you'd react, but after thinking about it, I realized that for us to keep growing together, we need to be completely honest, so without fear of judgment. John took a deep breath. He saw this as a chance to strengthen their bond even further, even if it meant stepping into unfamiliar territory. It wasn't just about Caroline's desire, it was about the courage she showed in sharing something so personal. He recognized that exploring this idea would require profound trust and respect. I need some time to process this, Caroline. It's not something to decide overnight, but I'm open to discussing it and understanding what this means to you, and potentially for us. Relief washed over Caroline's face as she nodded. That's all I'm asking, John, that we talk openly, without pressure. They continued their meal, shifting to other topics, but that conversation had already altered something between them. A seed of understanding had been planted, and although John still felt a sense of shock, he also experienced a spark of excitement about the prospect of exploring this unknown path with the woman he loved. It felt like a first step towards something new. In the days that followed Caroline's revelation, John found himself revisiting their conversation repeatedly. The idea stirred his thoughts and emotions, challenging not only their marriage, but also his own views on love, trust, and intimacy. It was as though her words had lifted a veil, revealing previously hidden aspects of their relationship. One morning, while drinking coffee, John's thoughts wandered back to that night. Caroline's words echoed in his mind, urging him to confront the possibilities. He picked up his phone and hesitantly began researching the topic. Every article and testimonial he came across raised new questions. Stories ranged from couples rediscovering passion to others facing regret and disappointment. The complexity of the experiences surprised him. It became clear that this world was far more intricate than he had first imagined. That evening, when Caroline returned home, she found John sitting on the couch, lost in thought. He quickly straightened up as she walked in. Caroline immediately sensed that the discussion she had been anticipating was about to take place. I've been thinking a lot about what you said and doing some research, John began, wasting no time. Caroline sat beside him, her expression a mixture of hope and nervousness. And, she asked, trying to sound composed. John took another deep breath, organizing his thoughts before responding. I've read about other couples' experiences, and I think I'm starting to get a better understanding of what you're looking for. But at the same time, I can't help feeling a bit apprehensive about what this could mean for us and our relationship. Caroline listened carefully, absorbing every word. She knew her suggestion wasn't easy for him to digest. I'm not trying to pressure you, John. I just needed to be honest about what's been on my mind. Maybe we can explore this idea together, but only at a pace we're both comfortable with. John nodded thoughtfully, considering the depth of her proposal. This wasn't merely about visiting a swinger club. It was about confronting and overcoming insecurities as a team. It was about strengthening their trust and connection in a new way. Caroline, I understand, but this makes me wonder, are we searching for something outside because there's something lacking here? He gestured toward the space between them as though the emptiness could be physically felt. Caroline reached out, softly touching his cheek. Nothing is lacking, John. I love you. I've always loved you and always will. It's just that sometimes I feel we've grown so accustomed to each other that we stop surprising or challenging ourselves. I don't want us to lose that. Her words struck a chord. It was true. They loved each other deeply, yet maybe their passion had drifted into routine. John felt his chest tighten. The idea of doing something so unconventional was unsettling, yet it hinted at the possibility of transformation. After a long pause, he exhaled. All right, let's do this. Let's keep talking about it. No rush, no pressure, but with the understanding that no matter what, our love and respect come first. Caroline's face lit up with relief. That's all I needed to hear. Let's create this experience together, at our own pace. John felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The conversation had been tough, but it left them feeling more connected than before. They embraced on the couch, feeling each other's breath. And for the first time in a while, John sensed a renewed energy, a spark igniting between them. It felt as though they had stepped through a doorway into a new chapter, and their willingness to explore it together was already a major step forward. Night fell, and the moment had arrived. John and Caroline sat in the car, parked outside the swinger club. The building was nothing like John had anticipated. No glaring neon signs or blaring music. Instead, it was a discreet house with a tasteful, modest exterior, blending in with the others on the street. There was a touch of elegance about it, as though only those who understood this alternative world could locate its entrance. John drew in a deep breath, steadying the storm of emotions swirling inside him. He turned to Caroline, who met his gaze with a reassuring smile. There was a shared understanding between them, a silent vow that no matter what awaited inside, they would face it together, free of pressure or expectations. Caroline rested her hand lightly on his, offering comfort and calm. If at any point you feel uneasy, we'll leave. No questions, no embarrassment, she said with quiet confidence. John knew she meant it, and that gave him a sense of security. Hand in hand, they stepped inside. The entrance hall welcomed them with dark wood furnishings and gentle lighting. Nothing about it felt threatening or crude. Instead, it was warm and intimate. A couple greeted them warmly, explaining the rules and layout of the space. The guidelines emphasized respect and consent above all else. Everyone retained the right to say yes or no at any moment, without fear of judgment or coercion. As they wandered through the hallways, exploring different rooms, John and Caroline encountered scenes of affection, conversation, and laughter. It wasn't vulgar or obscene as John had feared. Instead, people moved at their own pace, appearing comfortable and open. He felt like a traveler in a foreign land. Everything was unfamiliar yet oddly welcoming. John realized that the greatest hurdle wasn't the experience itself, but the assumptions he had brought with him. They arrived at a lounge adorned with velvet sofas and silk curtains. Soft music played in the background, creating a soothing ambiance. Caroline picked up 2 glasses of wine and handed one to John. "To new beginnings," she said with a sincere smile. John couldn't help but smile back. He took a sip, letting the wine's warmth settle his nerves. They sat observing the space, chatting about everyday topics while letting the atmosphere unfold gradually. Suddenly, a couple approached them, their smiles warm and filled with curiosity. Is this your first time? The woman asked lightly. Without hesitation, Caroline nodded. Yes, we're just exploring, no expectations. John was surprised by how composed she seemed, treating it as if it were just another social gathering. The couple invited them to join their table, and before long, the four were engrossed in easy conversation about restaurants, travel, and local attractions. John found himself laughing, easing into the environment. It felt more like a gathering of friends than anything risque, yet an undercurrent of possibility lingered in the air. There was a sense of standing at a threshold between the familiar and the unknown, where every decision and gesture held the potential for discovery. Caroline squeezed his hand lightly, and he turned to see her eyes sparkling, silently asking if he was okay. He smiled back, realizing he felt more comfortable than he had expected, not because of the place, but because she was there with him. This shared experience, regardless of what came next, had already drawn them closer. Time seemed to move differently inside that house. Every moment felt heavier, as though poised to become unforgettable. John realized this wasn't just about the setting or the people, it was about the inner journey he and Caroline were navigating. Each step took them deeper into the trust and bond they had built over the years. Perhaps the true challenge wasn't the club itself, but their ability to let go, lower their guards, and step into the experience together, not just in this space, but in their lives. As the night went on, John and Caroline explored various areas of the house. In one of the larger rooms, a group of people danced to soft music, the dim lights creating an intimate and mysterious atmosphere. John observed his surroundings, a mix of curiosity and unease filling him as he adjusted to a situation so far from his usual life. Caroline, in contrast, seemed completely at ease, almost as if she were savoring a new sense of freedom. She laughed more easily, moving with a lightness John hadn't noticed in a long time. They exchanged a glance, and for a brief moment, he wondered if she was enjoying herself more than he could understand. The thought troubled him, but he tried to push it aside, not wanting his insecurity to spoil the moment. The couple they had met earlier approached once again, inviting them to play a game, which they described as a relaxed way to meet others. Caroline eagerly agreed, and John, though reluctant, also consented. They all sat in a circle as one of the players explained the rules. The game was a question and answer format, resembling a more provocative version of Truth or Dare that fit well with the atmosphere. The first questions were light and innocent, asking about their favorite trips and how they had met. But as the game progressed, the questions grew more personal. One person asked Caroline what her greatest unspoken desire was, and she hesitated for a moment, looking at John. He noticed a spark in her eyes, a mix of nervousness and excitement. I've always wondered what it would be like to see you desired by someone else, she said, her voice shaky but steady. John's heart began to race. Her confession surprised him, not just because of the idea itself, but because it suggested a desire to explore and uncover new aspects of their relationship. He didn't know how to respond. Part of him was intrigued, but another part, a more primal side, felt vulnerable and challenged. I'm not sure how I'd react to that, he said honestly, meeting her gaze. Caroline nodded, as if she had expected his response. Neither do I, she admitted. But what interests me more than the act itself is what it would reveal about us, about how we handle our limits and our jealousy. As the conversation continued around the circle, John and Caroline were lost in their own thoughts. For John, the idea of seeing Caroline desired by someone else was both captivating and unsettling. He wondered how far he was willing to go and if he was ready to explore the boundaries of his own desire and possessiveness. The game eventually ended, and people started to disperse, some heading to the dance floor, others lounging on sofas around the room. Caroline and John moved to a more private corner to talk without interruption. What you said, John began, but Caroline placed a finger gently on his lips. John, I just wanted to be honest about my feelings. I don't want to pressure you into anything. What we're doing here is about discovering how far we can go together without fear or judgment. John took a deep breath, trying to process everything. It was true. They were there to explore, to discover each other in ways they never had before. But at the same time, he felt they were nearing an invisible boundary, one they hadn't fully discussed. What if we cross a line we can't come back from? He asked, his voice tinged with sincerity. Caroline met his gaze, her eyes reflecting a mix of love and challenge. The only line we can't cross is disrespect, she replied. As long as we remain open and communicate our limits, we'll be fine. We're here because we love and trust each other. Nothing else matters. Her words moved him. John realized that the true test was trust, the ability to open up and be vulnerable without fear of judgment. It was a test of love, showing that they were willing to confront their fears together, no matter how uncomfortable it felt. He smiled at her, feeling the weight of the moment lighten into something more intimate. Then let's do this. Let's see how far we can go together, he said. Caroline returned his smile, and they kissed, a kiss full of promises and uncertainties. The night still held many possibilities, and no matter how unfamiliar the path ahead seemed, they both knew that in the end, what mattered most was their connection. The next morning, after visiting the Swingers Club, John and Caroline woke up side by side, still surrounded by the room's comfortable ambiance. The sun gently filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the floor. John turned to Caroline and studied her for a moment. She looked peaceful, a small smile on her lips, her hair spread across the pillow, as if everything were exactly as it should be. The night before had been a plunge into unknown territory. They hadn't crossed any boundaries they weren't ready to face. They had simply observed, talked, and connected in ways that had once seemed impossible. Yet John couldn't shake the feeling that there were more questions than answers forming in his mind. Caroline opened her eyes and met John's gaze. Words weren't needed in that moment, but John felt compelled to speak. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly, his voice still rough from sleep. She took a deep breath before answering. "I'm fine. Actually, better than I thought I'd be." A shy smile appeared, and she reached out to touch his face. It was strange, but at the same time liberating. "And you?" John hesitated for a moment, trying to organize his thoughts. "I feel different. I think seeing you there, so confident and at peace with what we were doing, the experience made me realize there's so much about us that we haven't discovered yet. And while that's unsettling, it's also thrilling." He paused, searching for the right words. "I'm not sure if I want to go any further, but I'm glad we did this, that we allowed ourselves to explore something new." Caroline nodded in agreement. "I understand. I'm not sure I want to go further either, but just experiencing this with you has brought us closer in ways I didn't know we needed." They spent the morning discussing everything they had seen and felt, the moments they shared, the people they met, and every detail was examined. It wasn't about seeking validation or judgment, but about a new and fascinating world they had explored together. There was no embarrassment, just a genuine desire to connect. As the day progressed, the intimacy between them became tangible. The trust and closeness they had developed over the years seemed to deepen, becoming more genuine. There was a newfound ease in their interactions, as if they had shed an invisible burden. Later, as they prepared dinner, Caroline approached John with a serious look on her face. "I've been thinking," she began hesitantly. John paused, knife in hand, and looked at her, curious about what she was about to say. "About where we go from here. About us," she continued. "I feel like what really brought me here wasn't just trying something new, but wanting to reconnect with you, to rediscover ourselves. But I'm also afraid that this could turn into an endless need for something new, as though what we have will never be enough." John recognized the seriousness of her words. It was a valid concern. What had started as a way to add excitement to their relationship could easily become a never-ending search for more, something they might not find outside of themselves. He took her hands, feeling the warmth of her skin. "I've thought about that too. Maybe the answer isn't in searching for something new, but in understanding what this moment means for us internally." He placed her hand over his chest, feeling his heart beating under her palm. "If this changed how we see each other, it's already worth it. We don't need to go any further, Caroline. We just need to keep choosing each other every day, just as we are." She smiled, her eyes filled with emotion. "You're right. It's not about the place or the people. It's about how this made us realize that despite everything, there's still so much to explore within each other, so many layers to uncover." Dinner became a quiet celebration of this new chapter. They discussed their hopes, insecurities, and expectations, opening doors that had been closed for a long time. That night, when they lay side by side again, they felt more connected than ever. It wasn't about the swingers club or what they might or might not do. It was about the courage to be vulnerable with each other, to let themselves explore not just their bodies, but their hearts. In that moment, they understood that true intimacy wasn't found in what they did, but in what they shared and what they felt for one another. The days that followed brought a new dynamic to their relationship. The shared experience at the swingers club had ignited something in them, a sense of urgency to reconnect in ways that went beyond the physical. They began to see each other differently, as though they had rediscovered the excitement of the early days of their relationship. One evening, while sipping wine on the porch, John broke the silence with an unexpected confession. "Do you remember what you said at the club about seeing someone else desire me?" Caroline nodded, uncertain where the conversation would lead. "I've thought a lot about it," he said, "and I realized that more than feeling jealous, I felt fear. Fear that it meant we weren't enough for each other." Caroline watched him closely. "John, you know that it's not about us not being enough, right? It's about discovering new parts of ourselves together." He sighed, as if trying to release a weight from his chest. "I know, but it took time for me to realize that. The truth is, in that moment, I felt exposed, like I was on a stage, and everyone could see my insecurities." He paused, staring off into the distance as if searching for the right words. "But looking back now, I see that vulnerability was what brought us closer." Caroline moved closer and cupped his face in her hands. "It was. And I fell even more in love with you in that moment for your bravery in opening up, for showing your vulnerabilities. It made me realize that we don't need anything beyond ourselves to keep this flame burning." That night, as they talked and laughed more freely than they had in a long time, John had an idea. "You know what I think would be amazing? The two of us just getting in the car, driving without a destination, no plans, no reservations. Just us, the road, and the unknown." Caroline looked at him in surprise, but soon a smile spread across her lips. "That sounds perfect. Let's leave everything behind for a while and rediscover who we are, away from routines and expectations." 2 days later, they were on the road, traveling without maps or set routes. They stopped in small towns, spoke to strangers, got lost, and found each other in every new place and experience. There was no rush, only the desire to explore not just the world around them, but each other. One afternoon, while walking through a lavender field, Caroline stopped and turned to John. "I've never felt so free, so whole. You brought back something I didn't even know I had lost. The spark, the curiosity about the world and about us." John smiled, and there, amid the scent of flowers and beneath the open sky, he kissed her slowly, full of unspoken promises. "I think deep down we just needed to remember that love isn't a safe haven. It's a constant rediscovery, a challenge to ourselves." They held each other tightly, savoring the beauty of the moment. Every smile, every touch carried the weight of their past, now forming a strong foundation for the future they were building. As the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over them, John whispered something that made Caroline's heart race.